The House will come to order. Prayer by the chaplain.
Loving Creator, today is the day, the start of the session of the Minnesota House of Representatives. Every start is fresh, O God. Every beginning is exciting. There's a lot of work to be completed in the next 3 months, and may it be completed with cooperation and collaboration across the aisle. We ask today that you bless the members of this House to be dedicated and faithful servants to the people they serve. May they be filled with gratitude at the opportunity they have to share their skills of cooperative leadership in this place. We thank you for the abilities they've been given to do their work and to contribute to the common good. May they use their talents as good stewards of your many gifts and thereby be true creators of justice and partners of peace. Loving God, give each member clarity of thought and purity of motive so that they may give of their individual strengths in creative and imaginative ways. May all that is done this day in the people's house be for your honor and your glory. This is our prayer this afternoon, O God. Amen.
The chaplain for today is Reverend Richard D. Buller from Valley Community Presbyterian Church in Golden Valley, Minnesota. Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would Representative-elect Jeremy Munson from District 23B please come forward to take the oath of office? Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota, and that you will faithfully discharge the duties of the office to which you have just been elected to the best of your ability, so help you God? I do. Congratulations. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. Quorum is present. The clerk will read the journal of the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 90th Session, 2017, 62nd day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Monday, May 22nd, 2017.
If there is no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objection, the journal is approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Introduction of bills. The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The chief clerk will report the House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction and first reading of House Files 2723 through 2928.
First reading, House Files 2723 through 2928. Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there's no objection, we'll take action on these motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail. There are a series of motions at the desk. The clerk will report the motions.
Anderson S. moves that House File number 399 be taken from the table, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 5 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Anderson, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is dealing with severance pay that was dealt with in last year, and that is my motion.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Garofalo moves that House File number 600 be taken from the table, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 3 members of the House, and the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses.
Recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Garofalo, to your motion.
Mr. Speaker, that is my motion.
Any discussion on the Garofalo motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Vogel moves that House File number 740 be taken from the table, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 5 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses.
Vogel. The member from Scott, Representative Vogel, to your motion.
Mr. Speaker, that is my motion.
Any discussion on the Vogel motion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Anderson S. moves that House File number 778 be taken from the table, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 3 members of the House, that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses.
Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Anderson, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is my motion.
Any discussion on the Anderson S. motion? The member from Hennepin, Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If members could just indicate what the bills are about that they're discussing, that would be helpful.
She will yield. A member from Hennepin, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My apologies, Representative Hortman. This is the stadium bill.
Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did not understand a word you said.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hortman, this is the stadium bill dealing with the Minnesota Sports Facilities Authority. Last year we had the conversation about the abuse of the suites that were used at the Viking Stadium, and this bill addresses that problem.
Any further discussion on the Anderson S. motion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion prevails.
Torkelson moves that House File number 859 be taken from the table, and that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 5 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses.
Recognize the bill author, the member from Brown, Representative Torkelson, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill deals with the conveyance in Koochiching County. That is my motion.
Any discussion on the Torkelson motion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Loon moves that House File Number 947 be taken from the table, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 5 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses.
Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Loon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is my motion. House File 947 provides clarifications to the calculation of general education aid.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my question might be to the Majority Leader. I just would like a little direction of, we're sending several bills to conference committee right away. Are these bills that are of a budget nature? It certainly seems that they have quite a variety of topics. It seems very early in the session to be sending things to conference, unless they were conference committees that were working and ran out of time at the end of the last session. So if you could just give us a little roadmap of what it is that we're doing with these motions this morning. Thank you.
She will yield. The Majority Leader, the member from Hennepin, Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Hortman. We just want to be prepared. We want to be sure that the conference committees are reported right away so that members can get to work. We have a very short session, and this will allow all the conference committees that we want to move forward potentially to get to work right away.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I just express a little bit of concern because I think one of the problems we had at the end of last session was a lot of very creative, imaginative things happening in conference committees that hadn't necessarily been heard in regular committees, hadn't been in bill form that had been introduced, hadn't been debated on the House floor. And I just wanted to state my concern, because I don't think I can ask the majority party to assure me that we're not going to be using these conference committees for funny business, but to state my concern that the conference committees that have just been formed should have publicly noticed meetings with agendas that are clear ahead of time, where people vote on text in open committee so people can understand what it is that they're voting for and against, and what the business before the conference committee is, and that there aren't, things that are sort of dark of night slipped in that we only realize later are hidden, buried deeply within the bills.
Any further discussion on the Torkelson motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Davids moves that House File Number 1226 be taken from the table, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 5 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses.
Recognize the distinguished tax chair, the member from Fillmore, Representative Davids. To your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is my motion. It's the Department of Revenue's technical bill. I'm carrying it on behalf of the department.
Any discussion on the Davids motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Anderson P. moves that House File Number 1717 be taken from the table, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 3 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate to confer on the disagreeing votes of the 2 houses.
The member from Pope, Representative Anderson, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Yeah, that's my motion, and this bill is the Ag Policy Bill left in conference committee.
Any further any discussion on the Anderson P motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. Announcements by the Speaker.
Announcements by the Speaker. The Speaker announced the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File Number 399. Anderson S., O'Driscoll, Fenton, Nash, and Detmer. Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File Number 600. Garofalo, Baker, and Poppy. Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File Number 740. Vogel, Hoppy, Loon, Kreshaw, and Halverson. Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File number 778. Anderson S., Vogel, and Sandsted. Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File number 859. Torkelson, Runbeck, Petersburg, Howe, and Kosnick. Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File number 947. Loon, Erickson, Bennett, Kreshaw, and Murphy M. Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File number 1226. Davids, McDonald, Hertas, Drazkowski, and Marquardt. Announcement by the Speaker. The Speaker announces the appointment of the following members of the House to a conference committee on House File number 1717. Anderson P., Hamilton, and Johnson C.
There are 2 additional motions at the desk. The clerk will report the motions.
Drazkowski moves that House File number 2495 be recalled from the Committee on Taxes and be re-referred to the Committee on Education Finance.
Recognize the member from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is the bipartisan Drazkowski-Marquardt bill that provides property tax fairness in our schools, and have the okay of both chairs to move it, and it actually began in the wrong committee. Appreciate your support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Drazkowski, would you yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We had a hearing on this a week ago and learned that it would really have an implication for the tax base of all communities across the state and have an impact on city and county funded referendums, which are usually in the jurisdiction of the tax committee. So is it your intent that after it's been considered by the education committee, it comes back to the property tax division and the tax committee because of its broader tax implications?
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Loeffler, yes.
Any further discussion on the Drazkowski motion? The member from Dakota, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Drazkowski yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Drazkowski, would this bill also provide the opportunity for levy equalization for communities such as South St. Paul, where the tax base is not there, when there is a levy that they're not able to get the same type of support that other communities may have? Is that something that would be relevant or considered in this bill?
The member from Wabasha, Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, members, yes, it does. And there is a component looking at the debt equity or debt equalization in communities throughout the state. And we look forward to that discussion as we bring this bill through all of its respective and pertinent committees. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion on the Drazkowski motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Lesch moves to amend the permanent rules of the House of Representatives for the 2017-28 session as follows.
A copy of this amendment is being passed out right now to the members on the floor. Recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Lesch, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I had conversations both with Minority Leader Hortman about this last month, as well as Majority Leader Pepin. It's my expectation that Majority Leader Pepin will move this to the Rules Committee. I ask members to support that. Representative O'Neill and I worked on this language together. It's just a first step at getting a conversation started about where we need to go with sexual harassment at the Capitol when the accused is a member and the accuser is not. And we hope that we can result in some just results for this. So I would ask members to vote aye on Majority Leader Pepin's motion when she moves it to the Rules Committee.
Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Lesch, as well as Representative O'Neill, for putting forward this proposal together. As everyone knows, we put together a subcommittee on workplace safety and respect. We've already sort of outlined some of the potential hearings, and my intention, Representative Lesch, would to have you come and present to that subcommittee probably on March 5th. As early as March 5th, could be later, but that's the intention right now. That committee is also going to bring in the National Conference of State Legislatures to discuss what some of the other states are doing. We're going to bring in employment law experts. We're going to have members have an opportunity to come forward with anything that they want to propose. And most importantly, it'll be an avenue for members of the public to come forward and provide public testimony as well. So I thank you for bringing forward a proposal and encourage others, if they have proposals as well, to come forward. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I move that the Lesch motion be referred to the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration. And members, I would ask for your support.
Representative Pepin moves that the Lesch amendment to the House rules is referred to the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. The member from Hennepin, Representative Omar, for what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Speaker. Welcome back, everyone. It's really exciting for us to be back at another year doing the great work for all of Minnesotans. I rise today because last year in the creation of the Posse Caucus, we started a tradition of recognizing Black leaders in honor of Black History Month. And so today I want to take the opportunity to recognize a Black leader within our communities, Congressman Keith Ellison. Born on August 4th, 1963, a graduate of the University of Minnesota Law School. A former member of the Minnesota House of Legislators, he became the first Muslim legislator to be elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives, and later went on to be elected as the first Muslim Black congressman elected to the House of Representatives from Minnesota. When he was elected, he was quoted as saying, "When I looked at my spiritual life, and I looked at what might inform social change and justice in society, I found Islam." Congressman Keith Ellison is known as a champion for justice, for fighting for equality and civil rights, and today we honor him. I yield the rest of my time to Representative Erin May Quaid.
She will yield. The member from Hennepin, Representative May Quaid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, so often when we recognize leaders, perhaps during Black History Month, we recognize leaders that are no longer with us. And with Congressman Keith Ellison, it's someone that is not only alive and well today, but one that we know personally. I worked for Congressman Keith Ellison, and as a champion for justice, he is also a champion for a politics of inclusion and generosity. Having worked with him, I know him to be a voracious reader, someone who prefers tea to coffee, and always says exactly what's on his mind. But one of the things that is most amazing about Congressman Ellison is he wants to encourage everybody to participate in our democracy. As an apostle of democracy myself, I have seen this resonate throughout his district and with his constituents and throughout the entire state, as he includes every single person in our state and encourages them to vote and get involved and participate in our democracy. So today we honor Congressman Keith Ellison as a wonderful member of our congressional delegation, a wonderful Minnesotan, and certainly a wonderful person that both Representative Ilhan Omar and I know. Thank you.
Announcements. Recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Pepin.
Members, Governor Dayton is having a reception in the governor's reception room from 1 to 2 p.m. today and encourages your attendance.
Any further announcements? The member from Hennepin, Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3:30 p.m. Thursday, February 22nd, 2018.
Representative Pepin moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3:30 p.m. Thursday, February 22nd, 2018. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. Representative Pepin.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Pepin moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails, and the House stands adjourned until 3:30 p.m. on Thursday, February 22nd, 2018.